All right. Well, hello, everybody. Everybody's just coming into our Zoom room. We're delighted to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us this midday on a beautiful Tuesday. It's great to be here together, on Zoom from wherever we are in the world. I'm Rabbi Sarah Berman. I am the Director of Adult Education here at Central Synagogue, and welcome to a program as part of our Israel at 75 celebration and reflection upon the Jewish democratic state and our relationship to it and its people right now. This program we're especially pleased to present. It features a friend and colleague, Rabbi Dr. Rabbi Kronish, a new book he has written, and two of the subjects of his book joining us this afternoon. Rabbi Kronish is the founding director of the Interreligious Coordinating Council in Israel. He's an independent scholar, an educator, a speaker, and a writer. He has lived in Jerusalem since 1979, serving as the director of the ICCI and director of a number of other organizations, as well as being a lecturer at Tel Aviv University and at Hebrew University. Dr. Kronish speaks and educates to a wide variety of groups in Israel, including synagogue groups and Jewish community missions and Jewish, Christian, and interreligious groups. He is also a practiced hand at being a scholar in residence at universities, at synagogues, and at communities throughout North America, Europe, and East Asia. Rabbi Kronish was educated at Brandeis University, the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Rabbi Kronish's new book, Peacebuilders, focuses on members of the Israeli Jewish, the Christian, and the Muslim communities of Israel and Palestine, looking at people who are seeking ways across the sectarian divides that governments seem unable to find their ways across. Rabbi Kronish, we are delighted to have you and two of your subjects today. Welcome. Thanks for joining us at Central Synagogue.
Pleasure. Thank you, Rabbi Sarah. And I'm going to say a few words before I introduce Galia Golan, and hopefully Huda Abuarquob, another person who was one of the stars of the book that I wrote, will join us a little bit later. So I live in Jerusalem for the last 43 years. Today I'm actually up in Nahariya. I was at Haifa University speaking about my book to a class of students who learn peace and conflict studies with Professor Ron Kuttner, who you know, Galia, or he says he knows you anyway. And I'm on actually vacation, but I'm happy to be spend this hour with you folks in New York, and as I see other parts of the country as well, since I know some of the people on the call. I want to just say one word of introduction before we start this work, maybe two. In my work, I have focused on what I call peace builders. Peace builders, in my definition, are people who work outside of the political framework, in NGOs, in civil society, and the like. I sometimes jokingly divide the world between the rabbis and the lawyers. So the peacemakers, as I call them, are the political people, the international relations experts, the lawyers, the diplomats, whose goal is to create peace agreements between nations, of which we have quite a few, or we had quite a few a long time ago. If I had a longer time, I would give you all the history of our peace agreements, but you can read Galia Golan's book on the successes and failures of the peace agreements. But suffice it to say, We had some of you recall back in the 1990s, the good old days of what we call the Oslo agreements, where we had the first agreements with the Palestinian people. We had the old agreement with Egypt from the 70s. We had one with Egypt. We still have the one with Egypt. We had the agreement with Jordan a year after Oslo. So we had a series of political agreements. Just for your note, we haven't had one since 1998. The last one was in 1998. It was called the Wye River Memorandum. And I always jokingly like to say, this was the pen Bibi used when he signed that agreement after he shook Arafat's hand. And if I ever see him again, which I hope I won't, I'll give him the pen and remind him that he could sign an agreement with Arafat or with somebody because he did it once. But if I don't think those part of his brain cells remember how to do that. In any event, so we've been a long time without peace agreements. And therefore, I decided to write a book in the last couple of years, which I call Profiles in Peace, Peace Builders in the Midst of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. I'm going to, if I succeed here, I'm going to put it on the screen for you to see, the cover. There it is. Do you all see that? Did that work? Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you, Ron.
So in this book, I decided to write about people who I call the voices of peace builders, because most of you have never heard of them. You only read the A story in the New York Times when you, in the morning with your coffee, you read the Chumash and the New York Times together, I'm sure. So you read our political story, right, and our security story, and lately you probably read our lack of democracy story, but we may get into that later if you want to. But peace builders, people who work in peace on the ground, are not very well known abroad or in Israel for that matter. Yet I argue that today and for the most part of the last 23 years, they are the only game in town right now. They are the only people who are doing anything to bring Palestinians and Israelis together, to envision a better future, to do practical programs and projects in a great variety of ways. And I wanted people to know more about that. So I chose 6 people, 3 men and 3 women, as you can see from the photo, 3 Palestinians, 3 Israeli Jews. The Israeli Jews are a mixture of secular and religious. And I wanted to focus mostly on what I call persistent peace builders. That means people who haven't given up despite many, many crises, obstacles, challenges that we've faced here over the years. I've lived here 43 years. Galia has lived here longer than I. And so we know the ups and downs of the peace process, and we're still at it in one form or another. So that's my introduction as to why I have decided to focus on peace builders, people in the civil society part of Israel and Palestine. And that's why I included in my book 3 people who are Palestinian peace builders as well, who are, I'm sure to you, a Jewish audience, even less well known than our Jewish peace builders. I could have written many more, but these were the 6 that I chose at this occasion. So now I will begin by introducing my friend and colleague of many years, Professor Galia Golan, and I'll just say a few words about Galia. First of all, we are both graduates of Brandeis University. Galia is a few years ahead of me, and we actually served together for several years on a committee called the Slifka Committee, where we chose an Israeli Arab and Israeli Jew to get a full scholarship to Brandeis University for several years, which we thought was a wonderful project to do. I was honored to serve while Galia was the chairman. Gaia came to Israel a long time ago. What year? Can you remind me?
1966.
66. Okay.
July
Before-
1966.
Right. And came as an academic. First was at the Hebrew University for a long time in Soviet studies, helped found the program in gender studies at the Hebrew University. And from the early 70s was involved in peace activism, first through the Labor Party and later as one of the founders of Peace Now, many years with Peace Now. Several years ago, you could tell us how many, Gaia left the holy city of Jerusalem for the Greek state of Greater Tel Aviv, where she teaches at the Reichman University now, and teaches about conflict resolution and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And in recent years, as you will hear in a few minutes, Gaia has been more active in a new group, or newish group, called Combatants for Peace. So I don't want to say too much more. Gaia has written many books. You can look her up on the internet and find all her publications. One of my favorite parts of writing my book was getting a copy of her autobiography to read, which was really a wonderful experience for me, in addition to the wonderful interviews that you granted me. And now I see that Huda's getting on the call, so there is hope. You see?
So
You
Ron, Huda
Yes.
is driving right now and will be in a place where we can invite her to join us on screen in about 20 minutes.
Okay, 20 minutes, I think. Okay, fine. So, Gaia, I will begin then by asking you to say a little bit about, if you want to go back a while, what motivated you in your early years, and maybe what continues to motivate you, even though the situation seems bleak, to be involved in peace activism in our country and region.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Look, when I first came, I thought, I didn't know very much, but I think if you would ask anybody on the street, they would have said the Arabs will never make peace with us. They don't want us here. We're a Western colonial implant in the Middle East, and they'll do what they can to get rid of us. My first political act in Israel was after the 6-Day War. I was in the 6-Day War. I was in a border kibbutz down on the Gaza, bordering the Gaza Strip as a volunteer. But when I came back to Jerusalem, I was living in Jerusalem, writing my doctorate at the Hebrew University. I thought, and we were told basically by the government, that now we had these territories that we conquered in the 6-Day War, and basically the government was waiting for a phone call, and we would, in exchange for peace, would give back the territories. And I believed that. What I didn't know, and it was many years before I learned through my research, that the phone calls came. But my first political act came in the spring of 1968, a few months after the war, when Israel set up a settlement in Hebron. And in my naivete, I thought, well, how are we going to give back the territories if we're going to be setting up settlements? I didn't know much about politics, and I wasn't particularly sophisticated, but it just seemed to me in my naivete that this was a bad idea. And so my first political act in this country was to sign a petition against the setting up of a settlement in Hebron.
And who was the government then?
It was Golda Meir and the Labor Party, which I joined in 1977 with a group of colleagues from Hebrew University. We joined very demonstratively because the Likud had just come to power. And we joined under the title of, in any case, labor, because we felt that the labor at least had a position of territory for peace, which of course Likud did not. Likud had a slogan, of Greater Israel, and we opposed that. So my first political act was really not a particularly sophisticated thing, but it came out of this understanding that if we set up settlements, how are we going to give back the territories? And I firmly believed that we now had something with which to negotiate. We had the territories. Jordan wanted, Egypt wanted back, Syria wanted back. And so in my naivete, I thought that's what was going to happen. And we ran around.
When did Peace Now start? When did you begin to be active in Peace Now?
Well, I went to a meeting of colleagues in which I thought it was very logical. They were talking about giving up territory in exchange for peace. Peace Now started with a letter that was published in the press. And I saw the letter, that was all. And my husband, who was in the reserves, he was a doctor in a combat unit, immediately sent his signature to the letter. And I did too. And they asked me to speak at a small demonstration in Jerusalem, because I was pretty well known as a Soviet specialist. I've been on television a lot. So they asked me to speak. And that's sort of how I found myself in Peace Now. I certainly believed in it. I believed that peace was possible. And again, it was this idea that we give back the territories and we're going to get peace in exchange, which seemed to me to be a very logical position. Many years later, in 2004, 5, 6, I felt that Peace Now was moving a little bit too close to the center. And I found myself demonstrating in the occupied territories against the building of settlements with a group that I had never heard of before. It was Combatants for Peace. And I saw that I was going with them to demonstrations. And so I joined Combatants for Peace. And I'll tell you about a little bit later if you want to hear more about that.
Yes, we will want to hear more about that for sure. So back, just one more thing about Peace Now. During the Oslo period, Peace Now was still very active.
Yes.
And particularly in all the way to the end, to the Taba talks. Can you tell us about some of the creative peace demonstrations that we talked about?
Peace Now was always active. It's still active. It's still active. And it's, I mean, we held demonstrations fairly regularly. The two dramatic events, one of them was at the end of one of our demonstrations after the Lebanon War, when the government commission produced its report, we held a demonstration in Jerusalem calling for the government, like Sharon in particular, to resign in response to the commission that found that the government had been involved in the massacre in the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. And at that demonstration, as we were ending the demonstration, a hand grenade was thrown at us. And one of our people, Emil Greenswag, was killed. And I took the wounded people to the hospital in I had a van at the time. And my husband joined us at the hospital. The other really
One second, if we may come back to that, because recently in the newspapers, that issue of Emil Greenspan being killed in a demonstration came up again due to the fear of violence now at demonstrations for democracy. So he's very much in the news again, Emil Greenspan.
Yes, it's true, although we certainly didn't expect it then. We really didn't.
Yeah.
That demonstration was at the end of a march, and there had been a lot of violence against us during the march. There's no question that the public had been stirred up, they'd been incited. And in fact, it was a neighbor of ours who threw the hand grenade. Oh. He was later arrested, convicted, he served 10 years in jail. The other really big event was the 400,000. When the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, two refugee camps in Lebanon, became known, and Israel's part in assisting in that Israel assisted by providing lighting and things like that. Israel controlled the camps, but it wasn't Israel that conducted the massacres. It was the Lebanese. We held a demonstration and some 400,000 people came. And that's
there.
about 10% of the population of Israel. You were there.
Oh, yes.
It was really quite an event because
Yes, it was.
it was 10% of the population. I mean, it's 400,000 people. That
That's
wasn't
amazing.
our figure. That's the figure that the police gave. And I think that was, of course, our biggest demonstration, but we demonstrated all the time. We would go out into the occupied territories and just put ourselves, sit on the roads to try to stop settlement building. We would go into Tel Aviv to the square and demonstrate. And basically when, for example, Menachem Begin went to Egypt, we held a demonstration in support of this trip, and we said to bring back peace. And when in 1988, for example, the PLO accepted the two-state solution,
And recognized Israel. And
in
recognized the state of Israel.
1988. And so they did that in November. And in December, we held a big demonstration in Tel Aviv saying, speak peace now with the PLO.
So
And
if I
those
may,
were our big moments.
but now in the last 10 or more years, you've moved from Peace Now to Combatants for Peace. I would venture most people on the call do not know much about Combatants for Peace. So I'll be happy if you say a bit about it and why you think it's a strong organization. I happen to agree with you on this, but I'd like to hear it from
Peace
you.
Now, Combatants for Peace is a unique group. It's Palestinians and Jewish Israelis working together for peace. We don't state, let me go back a step. The movement was begun, I think it was 2006, it may have been 2004, by former Israeli Jewish combatants, people who've been in the army and combat units, which is the same way Peace Now got started. But what was new here is that it was the Palestinians, and they had all been in jail. They had been activists, or call them terrorists, whatever term you want to use. And they met together in a West Bank meeting, very suspicious of each other. And there's a film about the way they began called Disturbing the Peace. And they decided to work together. I happened by chance to go to a public meeting that the Israeli contingent of combatants had in Tel Aviv. And I was very impressed. And I think what happened, I don't really remember everything, but it's a unique movement. There's like a sister movement called the Bereaved Family Circle. And every year together, we hold a joint memorial for the Israelis and Palestinians who have fallen, who've been killed or died in this conflict. And then we started to do a meeting together, a public meeting, marking the Nakba when Israel was founded and Palestinians were basically chased out of the country. So we work in Combatants for Peace. The whole point is that it's joint. It's people who have been involved in the conflict and have, as our symbol, our slogan shows, there is another way, and it shows putting down the weapons and coming together in dialogue, in joint projects. We build playgrounds together. We demonstrate together. The big event is the joint memorial together.
May 3rd this year. I just got the invitation today, May 3rd, and I've been going for many years, first in person. In fact, the last one I went to in Tel Aviv, I saw Galia giving out flyers, sitting at a table.
That's what I did. Yeah.
But the last few years, it's been on Zoom, attracting many thousands of people from abroad. So if anybody on the call wants to look it up, just go on the website of Combatants for Peace, and you'll see, I just went on the website myself. It's the first thing that comes up, May 3rd. It's a very, very meaningful event.
It's a very moving joint event. It really is quite powerful. I used to go as a spectator, and then one of the things I did in Peace Now was I was a fundraiser, and so when I moved to Combatants for Peace, I raised money for the movement. But the important thing about Combatants for Peace, and the reason I like it and I stay with it, is that it's joint. It's entirely joint, and the activities are together, the meetings are together. When we have a meeting together, we have earphones and we have translators, so we get the translation simultaneously. It's actually very impressive, because you're sitting there or you're working together with people who were fighters on both sides. They were combatants on both sides. And there's tremendous respect between the two sides, which is really what makes it so special. I have tremendous respect for the Palestinians who come with us. I don't know that they're particularly popular amongst their public, and I'm sure the Israelis were not popular, but on the other hand, we have young people joining us all the time. Young people who come out of the army and come to Combatants for Peace. It's very encouraging, and I believe that the slogan of the movement, which is "There is another way. We can talk to each other, and we know there's a solution out there, the two-state solution, a Palestinian state in the occupied territories next to the state of Israel, not instead, but next to. We don't necessarily propose that solution, but it's basically what we believe in.
Would you say that Combatants for Peace, similar to Peace Now, is also an advocacy organization advocating still for the two-state solution, or not?
Well, it's definitely advocacy, but we don't go out and necessarily advocate for the two-state solution. It's more or less understood. We advocate for, first of all, peace process. There's no peace process going on. No one's talking to each other. But we also come out, for example, the wars that Israel has conducted against Gaza. And basically, that's how I joined Combatants. I found myself going to their demonstrations. So I finally said, well, maybe I ought to join this group. And so we did demonstrate, and we do demonstrate on specific issues like the wars on Gaza or against settlement building. And we will go to Palestinian communities, and as I said earlier, we'll build a playground or we'll demonstrate against land that's been stolen from them to build a settlement, things of that nature. So it's advocacy in many ways like Peace Now, but we don't have a formula, but it's quite clear that what we're talking about is coexistence.
If I can ask you a question as a political scientist who's written several books on this subject, there's a lot of talk in recent years about the one-state solution, or a one-state solution, that people bandy around in the press and so forth. Do you think that that's any more realistic than the two-state, which isn't too realistic right now?
No, I don't. I really don't. First of all, I think it's impossible.
Right.
We've got two national movements, and Palestinian nationalism is definitely has definitely grown under the occupation. They want a state of their own. They want self-determination. They don't want to be ruled by outsiders. And frankly, I believe that as Jews, we have not only a right to a state, but a need for a state. I read a good deal, particularly when I was still living in the States. I read a good deal about the Holocaust. And I firmly believe, and that's why I immigrated to Israel, that we deserve a state, we need a state, we need a safe place to be. And you know, basically the Zionist movement got started. I was not in a Zionist movement in America, but the Zionist movement got started when the nation states were formed in Europe, and the Jews were odd man out. They weren't French, they weren't German, they weren't Italian when these nation states were created. And I believe that Jews deserve and need a nation state of our own. But we can't deny the people who were here, we can't deny them their rights, which is why I think the two-state solution is the only solution. I don't think one state is a solution.
Right. I happen to agree with you on that. I think it's very impractical, but we do hear a lot of talk about it from a sense of frustration on many parts that, you know, all these years it hasn't come about. So let's try something else. I don't know, but can I ask you one more historical question? That when I read your autobiography, or no, one of your other books, and you talked about the almost breakthroughs for peace.
Right.
So there were many years of negotiations or attempts at negotiations after 98, the last agreement. Was there one time that we were close to an agreement? And can you tell the people when that was and what happened? Because people may not remember back that far. That's ancient history.
The near breakthrough was under Ehud Olmert. And you know, it's a very interesting thing. It's the right-wing people who have brought us closest to peace. I mean,
politicians.
Politicians. Begin made peace with Egypt, although he basically did that because in order to hold on to the West Bank. Tzipi Livni, Ehud Olmert, they came from the right wing. I mean, Ehud Olmert was the son of dyed-in-the-wool Cherut people. That was the predecessor to Likud. And Rabin, Yitzhak Rabin, by the way, was in the right wing, the hawkish wing of the Labor Party. When I joined the Labor Party in 1977, I was in Shimon Peres's camp, which is
Lova Eliyav.
And Lova Eliyav, and the peace camp of
Labor.
Of
Mapai, Labor.
So it's an interesting thing that it's in fact these right-wing people like Olmert and Rabin who came to understand, that's how I interpret it anyway, that if we continue to hold on to the territories, we would become a binational state. And they didn't want that. And each of these right-wing people, and Olmert is the person who got closest to making a deal with the Palestinians. He got very, very close. They even have said afterwards that if they'd had a little bit more time, they may have reached an agreement. Their differences were not great when it came to territories and borders and so on, security. They were very close. And I firmly believe that there is a solution out there. It is the two-state solution. Palestinian nationalism, Jewish nationalism, self-determination for both peoples. It's out there, it's possible. There are blueprints for it. The Geneva Initiative mapped out all the details, including Jerusalem, by the way, sharing Jerusalem. I was also active in creating a women's group with Israeli and Palestinian women called the Jerusalem Link, or the and there are agreements, there's solutions out there, and I firmly believe this. But we don't even have negotiations at the moment. We don't have anybody willing to negotiate.
All right, I want to, we're still waiting for Huda to come on, to give anybody out there in Zoom land an opportunity, either orally by...
Ron,
Yes.
I'm gathering questions for you.
Oh, okay, so why don't you shoot any questions you have now?
You got it. But first, Huda, this is an invitation that if you are in front of a screen, if you are off the road, to turn on your video and turn on your sound to join us. Well, hopefully Huda is getting to a safer place to join us. There is a question about another possible political solution, which is confederation. Is that a real possibility? Is that a political scientist's dream of a solution? What do you think of confederation as a way forward?
First, there have to be two states. It has to begin with that. We have to respond to Palestinian self-determination and Jewish self-determination. Once we have that, there will have to be relations between the two. Now, if it's a confederation or if it's just trade agreements or what have you, the two countries will have to work that out. I think a confederation is possible. I think it's a long way down the road because we've been locked in conflict for a long time. To dissolve the border is not going to be an easy thing. It could happen. I mean, I don't think it's impossible. I don't think we could begin with it. We have to have two states and then talk about how they relate to each other.
I would like to share one quick story on that question. A few months ago when I was in the States, I had a talk with a Palestinian professor, Salim Sarsar, who teaches at Montclair State University in New Jersey. And I don't know if you run into that name. He's written books now on peace building. And we had a conversation before I lectured to his class. And I said, what are you doing now in terms of research? And he told me that he's working with Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, who teaches at Princeton, and a bunch of other scholars. And they've gathered 11 proposals for confederation that are out there with people thinking out of the box now and not just the same old, but all of them are kind of what Galia said, 2 states plus.
Yeah.
They all start with the 2 states and go from there.
And what's so interesting about that is by starting with 2 states, this isn't an immediate solution. This is a secondary step of normalized relations. It is not the primary solution. It's not the starting point, which I think is important for us to understand as your American audience who don't have to think about the ins and the outs of the steps, the stages that lead to a potential solution. I do have one more question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I have another question for you. It's interesting and not always what we would think about in a Jewish space like this. What role do Christian, self-identified Zionists who are Christian, so Christian Zionists, what role do they play in the quest for peace in Israel?
Okay.
Well, I think that Ron can probably answer that more than I can. I have met a number of the groups who've come over of Christian Zionists. I've met them mainly in the occupied territories, but I really can't answer the question. You know, I welcome any group that's interested in peace. I do not support groups that deny our existence, who support, for example, BDS. I feel, I guess today I consider myself a Zionist. I said I have no Zionist background, but I believe we have a right and a need for a state for the Jews. We need this. And I believe that the Palestinians have a right to a state. They were here first. I mean, I don't go back to biblical times, but they have very much a right as we do. And I think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to have one state for all of us together.
So for the Christian Zionists, I'll respond. The Christian Zionists are pretty much allied with the settler movement. Okay. They operate all over the West Bank and cooperate and fund a lot of the settler projects. And the mainline Protestant Christian groups, of which Bishop Yunan in my book is one of them, have a big argument, to say the least, with the Christian Zionist movement, because the Christian Palestinians who are a small number but indigenous to the land do not get along with the Christian evangelicals, not theologically and not politically and not practically in any sense. So there's a very big divide there. similar to the divide between liberal Jews and extremist Jews in this country right now.
One more question, and that may actually, you know what, I'm going to hold this next question and ask you something else first. As we wait for Huda, and because we have just over 15 minutes left together, I don't want her story to get lost. Even though Huda isn't able to join us on screen yet, or
I am trying now. I am
There you
trying
are.
now.
There she is.
Yeah, I got home. I'm trying now. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I got
That's
home.
okay. It's okay. So we'll let you get settled. And Ron, can you introduce Huda?
Yes, I'll be glad to introduce Huda. So do I see her?
She'll be
I
on
see.
in a moment, but you
Wait, I think
introduce
I
her
see
while
her
she's
now.
still off screen.
I can see her.
There we go.
Hi, Huda.
Huda, you're
There
on
you are.
mute, but we'll get you off of mute.
Unmute, Huda. Okay.
I'm so sorry, guys. This is not me. The British mandate taught us to be punctual. But when you are on Road 60 driving back from Ramallah, it's just insane. So I'm
Takes
really
as long
sorry.
as it takes. Yep.
I
Okay.
didn't mean
I'm
this
going to
is-
give Huda a short introduction and then ask her a question.
Okay.
So the brief introduction is Huda is a Palestinian Muslim feminist who lives in the village of Dura, which is a suburb of
Not a
Hebron.
village, it's a city.
Town next to Hebron in the southern part of the West Bank. Huda spent many years in America with Abraham's Vision. She studied at Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia, where she wrote a master's thesis on Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, what they all have to say about peace. She studied with a famous professor of conflict resolution named John Paul Lederach. And in recent years, is it 5 or 6 or more by now? Can you tell me? You're back in Palestine how many years?
Since 2013.
Since 2013. Oh, wow, that's almost 10 already. See, I lose track of time because of Corona. Huda is now back in Palestine, coordinating the work of a wonderful organization, which you should all know about. If you don't know about it, you should look it up on the website, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. When you go to their website, you will find something like 160 different organizations, which you never heard of, who are working for peace between Palestinians locally and internationally, and it's quite a remarkable thing. And so Huda has not only studied, like Galia, the theoretical aspects of our conflict, but has lived the conflict, and right now is working with many organizations in Israel and in Palestine who are in the peace-building camp. So Huda, the first question for you is why? Why are you doing this? Why have you been doing this the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, in the face of all the obstacles and difficulties? This is a question I've been asked many times. Why don't you just give up and read books and go to the movies?
Because Galia is not giving up and not reading and not watching movies. Galia, the mother, and Galia, the daughter, are partners, and they are not giving up. So how could I give up? Galia is one of the people that I look up to and learn from, and we've worked together on a number of things. I marched with her daughter with Combatants for Peace and the Bereaved Family Forum, which are part of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. And to be honest with you, if we are here in Palestine and in Israel give up, then there is no hope for sure. And this is something that we cannot afford. Hope is the only currency that would keep us in the streets. And I have to say, even with this government, to see a stronger Israeli civil society taking to the streets makes me so proud and so hopeful. Even if the anti-occupation agenda is not very prominent, and I'm okay with that now, But I'm telling you, I went for 2 Saturdays and I've seen the anti-occupation bloc going stronger. And I spoke there. I saw many young Israelis. And I think the equation of the occupation to non-democracy is a great asset to all of us, a great motto to follow. And I've seen the euphoria of people. How could we give up if we can take to the streets in such an environment and defend democracy, defend justice, defend Jewish and Muslim values? I think it's important for us not to give up.
Okay, I just want to tell you one quick story since you mentioned that. I go every Saturday night to the events in Jerusalem, and when I enter from one side, the people from Combatants for Peace and others raise my consciousness with signs that say there is no democracy with occupation. And there's an agreement between the demonstrators that those signs are there to greet us, so that our consciousness is raised when we go into the demonstration. Huda, can you tell us a little bit more about your work with Alliance for Peace? And I particularly want to ask you to say something about your work with Women Waging Peace, which is my understanding, the largest peace organization certainly in Israel these days. What are you doing with them, and what do you think the Women Wage Peace contribute to the peace building community?
All women, not just Women Wage Peace, but particularly this organization, because I had the privilege of advising and consulting with them from day one when they wanted to create the organization. I think this is the time for us women in Israel and Palestine to start bringing some senses to our leadership. And one of these organizations, also I worked with Galia on a women's project for Combatants for Peace. I worked with Bereaved Family Forum on women's projects. So the women getting into the activist arena in a stronger way on a level of organizing and policy has been happening at least since 2014 when I joined the Alliance for, or recruited by the Alliance for Middle East Peace to be their first ever on-ground regional director. And we changed the identity of peace building. We expanded the concept of peace and people to people. We now sometimes use the term co-resistance together. We resist together as Palestinians and Israelis injustices. And we were, through our work in advocacy and policy, we also try to disrupt the status quo. We have managed to get to a point where we both know that in order for the Israelis and the Palestinians to be liberated, this occupation has to end, because we all are fighting the same fight when it comes to the governments that is leading or controlling or hijacking our values at the moment. Women Wage Peace was an organization that wanted to be a left-leaning, and I have so much respect for the left in Israel. And I acknowledge the fact that we as Palestinians did not strongly stand by the left at some point in order for them to continue. But I also know that after the assassination of Rabin, the society in Israel has changed completely. And so Women Wage Peace, when they came to me, they said that they wanted to do another organization that looks for partners in Palestine and speaks with them all over the world or in the States and in Israel and Palestine, and prove that there is a partner. And to me, this was not the only thing that we needed. The Israelis for a long time, especially after 1995, they have tried to forget about the occupation. They want the wall, it wasn't physically against us, but also mentally for them to think that the occupation doesn't exist. It's not their problem, it's not in their backyard. And so we wanted Women Wage Peace to go to the pockets of the Israeli society that votes all the time, right wing. I've seen women from certain marginalized groups in Israel kissing Netanyahu's hand, calling him the king. And so I told them, if we really want to create and mobilize women, we need to speak to the pockets of the Israeli society, to the Mizrahi women, to the Orthodox Jewish women, to the Haredi women, to the Russian women who are becoming more and more extreme. We need to bring more youth to the tent, and we need to bring their attention to the occupation. And the occupation as a structure is going completely against Jewish values. If they believe in Jewish and values Judaism, this is going against their principle. And I kid you not, these women took that to the heart, and from 5 women to 100 women to 45,000 women now in Israel, demonstrating every Thursday, joining every activity, working on leadership with women, on leadership to bring
And
women
is there a parallel in, I recently heard about a group called Women of the Sun in Bethlehem.
Yeah, but again, I want to make sure that there is a difference when it comes to creating feminist movements in a society like Israel and a society in Palestine. Feminism has always been very prominent in Palestine, but it's not being called feminism. We always have had our women in the forefront to keep the identity of the Palestinian people, to maintain a stronger sense of our narrative, the heritage, everything. Not to mention that they were also obliged to be the ones who are running the household when men were not around. Not to mention that they are the ones who bury their children on a daily basis. So one of the things that I am doing now with women from the entire Arab world is to redefine feminism from a Middle Eastern culture, to root it in Middle Eastern cultures. So for women in Palestine and in the Arab world, not to have a pushback against their participation in political activism. And we're doing this through Women of the Sun, which is an organization that is becoming now a stronger organization with 2,000 members, mostly refugees, some of them bereaved, some of them are mothers of political prisoners. And they all have the same message, that peace for the Palestinians is not just a strategy or something that we can write about or agree on. Peace is a need. The ones who are losing on a daily basis their children in numbers that has not been, it's outrageous. Every day, 13, 15-year-old kids are being killed when they are not even engaged in a stone throwing kind of activity, not to mention anything else. So these women are calling on everybody that we have a dream, and that dream is to build a viable democratic Palestinian state, although everything is telling us that there will be no way that a two-state solution is going to happen. The Palestinians still feel that they need a citizenship. They need a status that says that they are citizens of a country acknowledged by the entire world. So when our refugees living in Syria, in the middle of an internal war in Syria, they can leave just like other Syrians, but the Palestinian refugees couldn't leave because they don't have a status, and they had to face death in El Yarmouk refugee camp. So these women are saying that enough with men shooting at each other. It's time for women to take over, to sit on the negotiation table, and not to fight for narrow interest kind of game. We want our kids to live. We want a viable state. We want our kids to reach their potential. We want them alive, literally. This is what they say. And so we are gaining more power in the street in Palestine. But before we call it a parallel to Israel, we need to be careful about what the Israeli women are rallying behind and trying to change versus what Palestinian women are trying to change.
Huda and Galia, I want to ask, go ahead, Galia, please, go ahead.
I wanted to say one more thing about women. I'm a feminist, and I've been active as a feminist for many, many years. The point is that some people often prefer to demonstrate or work with people they can identify. not every woman is comfortable demonstrating, but to go out with other women is something they can do. And I remember an enormous march that we had, that the women, the
Women Wage Peace?
Yeah, Women Wage Peace organized, of Israeli and Palestinian women marching in the occupied territories. It was extraordinary. And I think, I very much believe, you know, we've had our people have told us over the years, you should unite all these peace groups. And I don't agree with that. I think that it's important to have something where people feel at home. There used to be a religious peace movement.
Yes.
There was a Mizrach L'Shalom. It was for Jews who came from Middle Eastern countries. People have to feel comfortable, and particularly I think women have to feel comfortable, because that's not a natural thing. The men are running the show, they're mainly politics and so on. And so I think that we provide an answer when we provide a women's group. I think we make women feel more comfortable, and women can speak to women. I've been in both types of groups, both mixed groups, and I've created women's groups, peace groups of Israeli and Palestinian women. Whatever is comfortable. If it's more comfortable for you as a religious Jew to demonstrate together with other religious Jews, fine, go ahead. I think it's important to provide a vehicle for whoever wants to be out there. And I agree with Huda, there's a problem. I feel a problem when we go to these demonstrations for democracy in Israel that have been going on now for 11 weeks, I believe. We go as combatants for peace. We wear our shirts, we carry our signs, because we don't see it as separate. You cannot have a democracy while you're running an occupation. It just doesn't work. You can't. And so I feel they go together.
So can I ask you one last question, because we're almost out of time. I want you to imagine a situation, because other conflicts have ended, you know, and occupations have ended. Imagine for a moment for the listeners that the occupation ends one day. What would we see? What would the situation be like if we elected you two, the prime ministers of our countries, like, you know, they have in Finland and New Zealand, you know, women running the countries. No, I'm just kidding. But if it were to end, if it were to end, what would it look like? Tell us about your vision of what it would look like.
As I said earlier, I don't think there's any other solution. There are other ideas out there, but the only solution is to respond to Jews' search for self-identity, self-determination, and the Palestinians' right to self-determination. As I said, there are lots of plans out there. It's not a fantasy. There are lots of the Geneva Initiative, which I was not a part of, is a very, very concrete document that, you know, looks into everything. And I think it's possible. I firmly believe that's the only solution. And then there'll be relations between them. You mentioned earlier confederation. It might be confederation. It might not be. It might just be good relations. Like we have very good relations with Egypt, by the way.
Yeah.
They mediate for us in all kinds of situations. Why not? Yeah. Why not? We can have good relations between the two. There have to be. I mean, there has to be communication. There's a refugee issue that has to be addressed. People's homes that were destroyed, the settlements that have taken land. There are a lot of issues that have to be resolved, but they can be. That's the problem. I firmly believe that there is a way to resolve these issues. What we need, excuse me, is a government in Israel that wants to do it. We have to open negotiations. We don't have any. And
Huda, do we need a government in Palestine that wants to do it, or do we have one?
Oh my God, they are ready and waiting. And this man who is still called the president, is still waiting for that. I mean, this is part of why he has been compromised so far, because his strategy still is the two-state solution. The entire project of the Palestinian Authority is based on the two-state solution. But going back to your question and imagining, I think we need to be very realistic. The damage that these governments and this conflict has put on the Palestinian and Israeli people is not going to end in one day, even if we agree tomorrow to have a two-state solution. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. There is a lot of cleaning up, a lot of healing, a lot of trust building that needs to be done. And I don't believe that the next day it's all going to be lovey-dovey and honey land. And that's why I believe in women. Women roll their sleeves and they want to do work. From the day they meet to the day they are demonstrating or building projects together, they are convinced that this is the only way. So that's why I believe that we need stronger civil society led by women in order to rebuild societies that are ready to live together, coexist together, have natural, normal relationships based on justice and mutual respect and mutual recognition of pains and also of dismissing each other for years. So the entire educational system needs to change. Entire narratives need to emerge. But it's not going to happen as long as one entity thinks that their security is more important than the other people's security. There is, if the Israelis want to feel secure, they have to know that the Palestinians need to feel secured. In order for, it's not a political position, it's a need. And unless we women approach all these political positions that been used by leaders as manipulation tools to translate them into needs, we will never heal. We will never be able to build healthy societies. So I guess the day after will be a lot of work, and women will be work.
Okay.
So Huda and Galia, thank you both so much for sharing your visions of what peace building is. Ron, Rabbi Kronish, thank you so much for sharing their stories in your new book and more stories of peace builders in Israel and Palestine, pointing us ahead to our multi-level celebrations and reflections upon Israel's 75th anniversary. You have heard 3 groups named today. The Parents Circle, that's the bereaved families of those who have been killed in this conflict, Combatants for Peace, and Women Wage Peace, whose partner organization is Women of the Sun. We are going to hear from all of these groups in the centerpiece of our Israel at 75 programming, a series of panels coming up in April and May, panels where folks who are working cross-sectarian lines to bring peace, to bring resolution in non-governmental ways throughout Israel and Palestine. We will get to hear from these voices. Perhaps even Galia or Huda will join us again as part of one of those panels. We would be so delighted and so honored to have you. Look for more information about those programs coming up in your weekly members email and on our website. Thank you, everybody who watched us on Facebook, who joined us here in the Zoom room. Thank you, Huda. Thank you, Galia. Thank you, Rabbi Ron. It's been really a pleasure. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, Huda.
Thank you.
Happy Ramadan, happy Mother's Day. Ramadan starts on Thursday.
Right.
In our prayers, inshallah.
Thank you,
Thank
Ron.
you both very much. Thank you. Much appreciated.